Hello, and welcome to the Honest Hour podcast, where we go beyond the pitch and into the trenches with founders building meaningful, mission-driven companies. My name is Payman Shahmirzadi, and your host for today's conversation. Today's guest is Stephen Myles, founder and CEO of Pea6, with the flagship product FeelsReel, an AI-powered platform that turns children's stories into beautifully animated films, while amplifying diverse voices and reshaping access to digital learning. In this episode, Steve and I will explore how systematic inequality in education led him to build a tool at the intersection of literacy, technology, and justice. We talk about an uncomfortable realization of leadership and what it takes to build both a product and a platform, and why some of the most powerful market signals come not from data, but from personal experiences. Whether you're building in ed tech, leading a mission-driven company, or navigating the founder journey yourself, this is one packed conversation with Stephen that I'm really, really happy to share. Stephen, thanks again so much for being here. Really appreciate you and your time. Please share a little about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on. A little bit about me. I've been on this founder journey, I want to say since 2017. And that started with a failed fintech company after I left merchant processing and merchant sales working for Bank of America. WorldPay, Vanta, working with the Clover was their flagship product, which is now a unicorn at the current time we have this conversation. Um, so I think a big part of it for me was, kind of seeing the pain points of the customers and having real experience in a market tends to uncover some of those things when you're having, real life face-to-face conversations and seeing, the company you may be working for may not be serving them.
Mhm.
So between that trial and error, that failure, I think a lot of what we learn comes from us kind of falling on our face and then having to pick ourselves up. Then that transition for me into tackling this ed tech product now that I'm on this current journey, which has been about a year. Um, really, really kind of thinking about how I can tap into the space that I'm currently in and leaving the most impact for the people that I feel don't have the access or the bridge
Mhm.
or somebody reaching back for them. So community is really big for me. Culture is really big for me, and kind of finding ways to connect people and services and products from enhancing lives seems to be the thing that kind of scratches at my the back of my neck for me to get up and try to do something and have some kind of real net positive impact.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. Let's dive a little bit more in the specifics of P6 and the product feels real. So tell us about what is that core problem that you're trying to solve, and why is this a problem that you looked at and said, this is what I want to build my company around?
Yeah, it's tough because it's like, is it chicken or the egg, or is it the egg or the chicken, right? Like, what came first, and
Exactly,
why did it
yes.
cross the road? It's like the conversation's always there. So I think so. A big part for me is access, right?
Mhm.
Even if we're talking funding, if we're talking kind of core solution, core problem, a big part of it is really how do people how do people get to where they want to go?
Hmm.
And for me, when I was reflecting on my experiences and looking at kind of situations around me, then what is it that I care about, and what is it that other people have told me they care about, and what have I gone through that makes me an expert, makes me relevant as far as to try to have a voice, right? So a big part of it is kind of creating the vehicle, and sometimes you have to create the lane before you create the vehicle. So the core problem for me is was really kind of scratching at systemic racism in education because it prevents access. It prevents access for kids and for marginalized groups, and that it led me to really breaking down. You kind of have to deconstruct a little bit, but it led me to kind of breaking down access within education, whether it's technology or whether it's resources.
Mhm.
So that led me to really thinking about, how can I um, find a way to kind of make my mark and my impact. And a big part of that was the chicken egg, right? Like,
Mhm.
did this precede me? Am I just kind of a cog in the wheel of this process, or what? Right. So really exploring that led me to looking at the problem, looking at the solution, which, how do you really tackle something as big as that, right?
Right.
Without kind of getting lost in everything that's going around, or the conversations that are being had that are top down, then it trickles to, you know, lowly founders on my level that, are still trying to get somewhere and make some level of impact that can really help more people than just the people that I see within my zip code or within my neighborhood or within my city or within my town. And how does it spread, right? How do you
Sure.
have that butterfly effect, so to speak? So yeah, the core issue for me seems to be kind of tackling, education and its impact on individuals that don't have access, as well as looking at, what prevents people from having a quality education, having
Hmm.
access to
Hmm.
technology. And some of that goes to funding, where money gets allocated.
Right.
So it hits several prongs, but I mean, simplifying it, you have systemic racism, you have lack of access to
Mhm.
resources and tools and funding and capital, where money is specifically given and withheld. So after I explored and deconstructed, I kind of found my way through.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that. You're talking a lot about identifying the problem and really seeing it, and then looking back and saying, okay, given this problem, how can we solve it? What's the right technology that you can introduce to solve this particular problem? So,
Right,
from a founder's perspective, how do you think that was critical? How critical was that process that you went through with the identification of a market first, identification of a problem with a given group, and some companies are B2C, some are B2Bs, but identifying who's having the problem, and then
right,
stepping back and saying, okay, given my experiences, I can come up with the solution to solve this. And that sounded like that's a journey you went down versus building a product and then saying, okay, this product can apply to different markets. What's the best way to build a business around it? What's your thoughts
right.
on that?
Yeah, so part of it is going inward, I think, right? Like there's so many intangible things. I think any founder brings themselves to the situation, right?
Mhm.
So if you're not passionate about what it is you're building, more than likely you won't be here long. You won't be here long. And I think about, kind of combining what you're passionate about with, like you said, talking about the market, and you really have to do a lot of research. It really kind
Mhm.
of goes into what sources are you kind of identifying, and what's relevant, what's correct information, because we're kind of in the age of the deep fake, right? We're in the age of so much misinformation is intentionally put out there to mislead. So it's research. It's finding, the numbers and looking at the data and then seeing what stories that the data tells, right? Because numbers at some point in time can lie. I think it tells a narrative and shapes it, because sometimes people can kind of bend and flex and
Sure.
finagle, something to kind of fit their narrative. But it's really, kind of looking at what you're trying to solve, and is it a problem just for me, right?
Hmm.
Is it just me? Am I one of one? Or do you realize that there are more out there that are kind of dealing with the same situation? And I think from
Yeah.
there, that allowed me to really explore my life, and then that allowed me to kind of explore what other people are going through. No matter what community they're in. If you're looking at, if you get away from the startup system and just kind of go mom and pop, what is the SMBs? What are they dealing
Right.
with, right? Like, what is
Right.
it that they're tackling? And typically, their storefront retail or some kind of level of e-commerce, but they kind of keep it huddled to their, number of employees, and the ticket price, and how many transactions they have, and then
Sure.
that kind of connects kind of to the previous space I was in as a merchant. So then when you take that level from small and medium-sized businesses, and you get into like enterprise, you go larger, you get into, kind of really high level corporate, and then now we're getting into a transaction that can be seven figures.
Hmm.
All of it is the same. The common thread tends to be the customer, right?
Yeah.
And it just depends on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Did you solve a problem? Was there a pain point that's still relevant then as it is today? And then it's kind of the growth scale conversation from
Right.
there.
Right.
So it just allowed me to look at it, allowed me to kind of again explore what people were going through, and what are real issues in everyday people's lives. And then when you intersect that with business, then you're getting a lot of the personal mixed in with business. And I kind of hate when people say it's just business because
Yeah,
it's not.
it's not.
It's
Yeah,
not, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you're not sitting in your seat because you're like, hey, I can make a lot of money doing this. Like a big
Right.
problem, um, with that is it's blinders, and it's not, you're not keeping things in your purview. You're really kind of, you have to have a 360 vantage point on what's happening because something is always changing, it's always evolving. Someone's always introducing something new.
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
relevance of that tends to be, again, what you're passionate about, and then the relevant of your solution to the problem, and does the problem still persist? So for
Yeah.
me, the problem still persists, and it has
Right.
predated me, right? We're talking, going back to the 60s. And then we're
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about, the United States being a country of immigrants, right? So everybody
Yeah.
there is not from there, but then the identity begins to kind of shape to what is the unified thread on how people are operating and moving throughout their personal life and their professional life. And all that intersects because the money that you make professionally goes to your family. It goes to the things that's important for you. So I think, it's always about finding the intersection between certain situations, no matter if you think there's a tie or relevance. There typically is if you look hard enough.
Yeah, amazing. Um, so given that you're talking, holistically about the problem, your company, you're building a very creative product, to solve this problem. And there's short-term product features that you're looking at in terms of what you want to bring in. And then there's also long-term. Your company, I've gotten to know you for some time, and your company, you can build a number of different creative products that go into different market segments within the space with the books, animations, media, all kinds of things, right? How are you balancing the decision-making process in terms of short-term focus in terms of what we're building versus long-term vision of the company, and being able to balance that, especially when you're speaking with investors, people that are looking to work with you and saying, this is what it is today, but here's the vision, but my focus is super important in terms of being able to gain the traction that we need in order to be able to do those other things.
Well, I think part of it is really trusting your eyes and ears because
Mm.
it's keeping the main thing, right? So if we go through the process of the startup ecosystem, it is really the relevance is of your company is traction. And that traction is can be defined by revenue, but it's also defined by people, right?
Yeah,
So that's also a data metric. So that then simplifies it to the MVP and the MSP, right? So
sure.
getting to what somebody's willing to pay for, right?
Yeah.
That's the proof. So if you do that, then it allows you to simplify what it is you're building in the short term. So in the short term, it's focus on 2, 3 core features. Make sure you hit those out the park, right? And people love what it is you're doing because that actually solves that initial problem. And then you also open it up to let it evolve and let it breathe. And that's when
Hmm.
people come to you and say, hey, I would really love it if you added this to your product, right? Does this exist or can it? So you're
Right.
directly getting that feedback from your customer base. And then that transitions into uh, features for future, right? So then you're like, hey, I think versus right? Like I think this is going to work for them, but knowing that, having, focus groups and, picking up the phone and calling customers,
Yeah. Very good.
getting into the survey part of it, like those things begin to break down what you can build for the future. And sometimes when you build something, I think the next part of it is a progression to see, oh, I tapped into this market, is something that was completely out of left field. It was unexpected and it just became something that happened in an organic way. So when I start looking at some of my features, there's some things that I think are really important, but that may not necessarily mean that they are once it's in the market and I'm with my MVP or MSP, and then my customer base is telling me what it is that they think is important, and then I should listen to that because that's the one who's actually spending the money to say, hey, I want to continue to support it, and that's where you get the loyalty. Then that's where you can kind of reduce churn. That's where you increase retention, and then you get into again some of the other metadata that allows people to say, oh, that's a successful company and it's only successful because people are paying for the product. You look at Apple, you look at Amazon, you look at giants, right? You look at
Yeah.
Microsoft, and what they're constantly building is constantly getting one sitting cutting edge, and they have the agility and the flexibility because they have the resources to say, I'm going to take a shot at this, without necessarily pulling their customer base. But the ones that are kind of starting off at my level, I think it's really important to really focus on the core features, and then you build it out from the directly back of your customers until you can justify a Hail Mary and then justify
Yeah.
doing something that's off the beaten path. That's not from the voice of the customer.
Yeah, no, I love that. And to grab a key point that you kept mentioning is the voice of the customer, talking to your customer. That is so important, And so I'm curious, I'm sure when you started looking at building your company, every founder has certain assumptions as what they think the customer wants, right? When you started doing the due diligence that you speak of in terms of talking to your customers, you mentioned picking up the phone and calling them, and doing surveys and be able
Yeah,
to really
yeah.
understand the voice of the customer. Were there any key assumptions that you had prior to doing that and you realized, wait a minute, what I'm thinking that is needed in this market to bring is not actually what the market is looking for. The voice of the customer is telling me something different. Were there key assumptions that you had to adjust the more you learn from your customers?
Um, I think my key assumptions actually came initially um, in direct alignment with my customer base because I
Okay.
have lots of friends that are in the education system.
Okay.
So my key customers started with educators and parents. And
Okay.
again, there's another intersection of that, right? Because it's not just kids go to school. Sometimes kids stay at home and the parent is the teacher. And
Yeah.
now I'm speaking with moms and dads. I'm having conversations with, these individuals part of PTA where they're actually having conversations in a school setting, in an education setting, talking about the problems of the education system as well as what are pain points directly for their student, their kid. So when you move that to a home environment, it was a wealth of knowledge that I was able to glean from, you know,
Amazing.
one degree of separation. So
Yeah.
then the wheels began to turn, and then again, when you are speaking specifically about culture and community, then you see what is a pain point for that culture and that community, and that can kind of become your niche. So I found my way through from having these conversations with educators. So no, the assumptions I made are more relevant to the future features, right? There's some
Okay.
assumptions I currently have based on what can happen from the media and entertainment perspective on
Right. Right.
where I can see this thing growing into, but currently no, it's really looking at learning, post COVID, learning from the computer, from having a great Wi-Fi connection, and its literacy, and then its creativity. Like, it was a creative way to learn, and some of that is when you mix in, some of the edutainment, so to speak. What is a way that keeps young minds engaged and allows individuals to tell their story, and part of that is in the imagination, the ability to write your own story,
Yeah.
to really kind of see it visually and then see it on another form. So, I go from writing to illustrating to animation, and
Yeah.
animation becomes the second visual way of saying, oh, I'm seeing something that looks like me, that reflects me and my identity, and the story is not told from the books that my mom and dad or parents or teachers or guardians have shown and put in front of me, but now it's actually from me, the actual creator. So the assumptions are more so for future, but not on how I was going through the
Sure.
process of
Sure.
building the product itself.
No, that makes sense. I appreciate that. Let me ask you, you're building an impact-driven company. You're really looking to invoke change within the community, within what the segments that you're speaking of, and that could be very emotional. There's an emotional tie in terms of when you're building a company like that versus just
100%.
anonymous,
100%.
right? So how do you manage your energy in terms of, all the trials and tribulations that you go through in terms of building a company? But, and looking at the metrics that,
Mhm.
when, for example, investors are looking at, what have you done lately? Where's the progress?
Right.
Where's the traction? And here you're trying to build something that's impact driven. How do you maintain a strong energy and focus level and let the process work itself out and you still being excited about building your company and being able to have that focus, even though, the drive that you have is from that personal side of it, but everyone's asking you for the hard numbers. right? And then
Right.
balancing that out and being able to say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm on a bigger mission here, and it's important to build a profitable company, venture backable
Right.
company, but there's more at stake here than just that. How have you been able to balance that?
Um, the balancing act is hard. I mean, as a founder, you will be tested, and your confidence will be tested, and your ability to kind of hold your conviction, right? So for me personally, I hang on and I hold on to the fact that what it is I'm building, I believe in,
Hmm.
and 100%. I believe in what it is that I'm doing, and I'm trying to find like-minded people that believe the same. So there's a lot of trust. There's a little bit of crazy, and I think you touched on it before we actually kicked off this podcast with
Sure.
partners, right? Like
Yeah.
finding people where
Yes.
it's a mutual street, it's a mutual road. You know, you're heading towards someone, someone is heading back in your direction with the
Right.
same kind of force and intensity and belief and trust and what it is you're doing and what they're doing, and you try to find a symbiotic relationship between the two. So partnership is key, but the balancing act is kind of that trust and belief in what it is you're doing, and I think you have to wake up every day with that top of mind, because if not, you can kind of get lost in all of the other things that may not matter to you that are extremely important. But if you have the right kind of partners, if you have the right kind of pathway and plan, and the plan allows you to pivot when necessary, but it allows you to kind of follow a blueprint, I think that keeps you on track.
Mm,
So it's really kind of it's believing that you believe,
there you
right?
go.
Like
There you go.
it's there and you don't see it and it's not tangible, but we know when I see this nice blue sky above me,
Yeah.
when the sun sets, there will be some stars, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
there's something that's still there,
Absolutely.
still exists, right? So I think it's kind of hanging on to that. So that's kind of you hang on to what you can't see, but it comes inside out, and I think you find people that latch onto that and believe the same.
Absolutely. I love that analogy. Is there something you used to stress about, maybe even obsessively as you're building your company, and now you look and say, you know what? In the big picture, that really doesn't matter.
Uh, it's still capital, but it's not at the I don't have the same exact like fire for that to happen and kick off like right now, because
Interesting. Okay.
I think in the past it was like I needed the capital to validate me or what it is I'm doing, and in that thought process, that left me chasing money, which took my eye off the ball. But if my focus is organically building something that matters to the people that I'm building it for,
Hmm.
then that'll come. That'll come in time.
So back
And
to the
at this,
mission driven, impact driven, that side of it.
right,
Okay.
it'll come in time.
Yeah.
And I'm 42, so I think about that if I've been doing it for this long with this amount of crazy and this amount of confidence and self belief, then at some point in time I will get there. Right. Again, finding the right partnership, finding the right people, and or just giving myself the time to build it on my own. I
Hmm.
remember, um, what was it? Was is it David from Carta? Uh, I want to say it was David from Carta, where it was on a Zoom chat, and he was talking about like don't take investor money. Like that became part of the conversation for him, because again, it's like you want to hang on to as much as you want to hang on to, and part of that is your ownership where things don't get diluted. And I'm sure I know the horror stories of founders building something and taking a loss, like selling
Yeah.
something for 30 million, and like they're only getting a penny.
Yeah.
I'm being
Yeah.
facetious,
Yeah.
but
For sure.
and that it's really understanding that I not all money is good money, and it's
Hmm.
kind of what's the pros and cons of the check that's coming your way, right? Is it something that takes power and control and the mission away from you, because it now it's important, those things are important to somebody else in a different way. So being impact driven, being being sound and what it is that you're doing from a net positive perspective.
Yeah.
But it's also, like you said, having the balance. You have to know that I want to build a company that is profitable and sustainable and scalable, because that allows me to validate the mission, not from my community, but from outside in. Right now, individuals can see and be like, "Oh, that is important to me too." And we were kind of waiting for that founder, that company, that team to do that thing that nobody was bold enough to do because it wasn't proven, or again, they didn't see it sound financially. So I'm hanging on to kind of tippy toeing between the two, because I think both are equally as important, because I think you can be um, profitable and altruistic at the same time.
Sure, sure. No, that makes sense. Let me ask you a little bit about the tech that you're building. You're building an AI platform. So, and obviously you're well aware of what's happening in the AI landscape. And AI is rapidly evolving, especially in the educational technology space. It's a very crowded space. How do you see
Yeah.
FeelsReel really differentiating itself from a technology perspective from the AI? Tell us a little about the type of AI you're building. And then how do you see that the differentiation? And maybe it's not just with features, but maybe some of the philosophy that you're using in terms of building your technology.
Yeah, it's you hit the head on the nail. It's really more about philosophy. Um, I'm not inventing anything new.
Hmm.
It's just how existing technology is purposed. And I think when you can take something as great as the accessibility of AI and put it in the hands of individuals, when you point them in the right direction, say, I'm going to use it for that reason. And that becomes a driving force, driving vehicle. So um, picture books aren't new.
Yeah.
Illustrations
Yeah.
not new.
All right.
AI generated video, not new. But the ability of putting it in the hands of individuals that can do more with that, you're getting more voices coming into being able to impact that. So now machine learning can happen. Now we can have a sentient, right? Now it can kind of grow organically with more information, more data, um, more diversity from the perspective of voices that we haven't heard. If we're talking children, we're talking women, we're talking queer, we're talking people of the global majority, we're talking BIPOC, we're getting more individuals to say that, hey, I have something to say.
Mm,
And if you do that, it's not just from one very specific purpose of technology staying at the top, right? If you can kind of hit the middle and you can kind of go below that line, now you're having people that have something really strong to say, and that begins to be culture changers and shapers. That is no different than how we hire. That is no different than the people that you bring into a company and put at C-suite levels. That is no different than people you may outsource as a 1099 and freelancer. It is really about the lived experiences of others, and they help shape that, right? I want my company, I want my product to be shaped by people that say, "Hey, thank you for the opportunity." Right? Like
yeah.
I didn't think that was possible, but again, you climbed up and you put the ladder back down and you grabbed my hand and you pulled me up. And when we got there, I was able to do the same thing for the next person. So
Hmm.
it's more philosophy, because again, the technology is not new. It's really about how you use it and how you put it into certain situation. And then again, you combine your passions for it, right? Like I used to be so scared about like, hey, I have this idea. Can you sign an NDA?
Yeah,
Hey, I have
yes.
this idea. Hey, I have this, I gotta go to an IP lawyer, right? Like I gotta spend all this money up front, and
Right,
it's
right,
it's really not that, right? But
right.
that's the way that I thought, because that's the way that I was taught. And
Sure.
I think a big part of going through certain situations, and even an accelerator like Peachscore, is you tap into information that you was not readily accessible,
Hmm.
and you didn't have it 5 years ago. You didn't have
Right.
it 2 years ago, and you didn't have it last year. And that allows you to take that new information and weave it into what you're doing, and it becomes a seamless thread. So it's philosophy for sure, 100%. It's philosophy. It's going to come down to people, and it's going to come down to, again, the strong belief that I think everybody has something to say and everybody has a story to tell.
No, that's amazing. What are your thoughts on founders needing advisors around them to advise them? And then how do you balance all the different advice or mentorship that's offered all the time to founders? How do you balance when they're conflicting? How do you decide what serves you and what doesn't? What are your thoughts around that?
I think that's a great question because a big part of it is who's your team, right?
Mm,
Who'd you pay, and who's there for just the genuine care about you, the person.
mm,
Um, so for me, I think all founders should have people around them that are giving sage advice because I don't think probably 98, 99% of people, when you walk into a room, you have to understand you're not the smartest person in the room.
yeah.
So there's always blind spots, right?
Yeah.
So I think when you tap into a network and you tap into advisors and mentors, choose carefully, choose carefully. But I think when you tap into that, and then you have smart people around you that are experts in what they do, and then you have surrounded yourself with individuals that know something about something that you don't. It only raises the tide. So I think that's key for founders because it's a big part of how you can not step on the same potholes and craters that other founders have fallen prey to because of not having information and not having information that's timely. When it comes down to kind of the conflict among that, I think it's the transparency, right? Like it's holding, it's bringing people to the fire, like come to the carpet, like fireside chat, um, you know, NBA team players only meeting, right? Like you close that door and you talk it out, right? You have to know when to lead and when to follow, and those times of conflict. If you are the head of your company, then you take the reins. You come in and uh, call people to the fold and say, hey, this is what's let's hash this out. Let's talk it through. You know, you go, and kind of mediate a little bit, and then you say, what's the direction? Like you have to remind people of why they came on board in the first place, right? It
Sure.
is whether it's sweat equity, whether it's again belief in the founder, whether it's a belief in the customer base and who you're doing it for, whether it's a belief in the actual product itself. You have to remind people of why they came together in the first place. Because when you get down to the true core of it, that's again the what unified and brought people together in the first place, right? It's not all the other things that we can get distracted by as people scale and money comes in, and then you start dealing with some of those issues. But you remind people of what's true, and it's always going to be the core. Whether that's the core team, or that's the core features, whether it's the core target audience, you have to remind people of why they showed up in the first place. And I
Yeah.
think that would put a lot of that conflict, put that to bed, so to speak.
No, great. No, that definitely a great way to look at it. And it's always good to have people around you that don't agree with you all the time. Really challenge your thought
100%.
process, right?
100%.
Yeah, yeah.
100%. Look at Kanye.
There you go.
No, it's you have to. It's not just about yes people, right?
Yes,
Because
exactly.
again, it's how do you know if those right intentions are and those if their intentions are the true intentions,
Right.
right? Like
Absolutely.
how do you know if you're
How
always
well does
hearing
it
that
serve you?
word? And
Exactly. Yep.
yeah, I mean, because a lot of people, like, and I love sports, so I keep having my sports connection. If you
Sure.
looking
Yeah.
at the 72 win team Bulls or the 73 win
Yeah.
team Golden State Warriors, they didn't learn a lot from the wins,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
You
Yeah, yeah.
learn from the losses, you learn from the failure, you learn from what do we have to do to course correct.
Yeah.
So if it's always a
Being
yes,
up
then you
three and
don't know
one
what
and
to
then
change.
yeah, being up
Right.
3-1 and losing that.
Right. The So it's
Yes.
really about learning from the losses and being able to say, "Hey, okay, we need to go back to the board. Like we need to put that up and we need to dissect that, put information here, move those pieces around, clear that out. All this is noise, so we have to make it make sense. And a big
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
that is coming from when you have to, right? Because and a lot of times when you're just winning, you're coasting, and when you're coasting, you're resting on what got you there,
Yeah.
and you think that is the only thing that's going to keep you there, and it's not. That's no staying power in that, because you always have to evolve, and you always have to adapt to the market. You always have to adapt to the new people that find you. You have to adapt to, what is it as far as like the core audience, and your loyal customers, and again, that retention. The people that came with you are the people that trust you and trust what you do and trust what you serve for them and trust what you solve for them. And then it becomes, hey, oh, okay, scaling new people, new customers, because they're only learning you in year 5, right? Like, if you have ever been married, I've been married for almost 14 years.
Mm.
And
Congratulations.
when you could, thank you. So when you go through that situation, like, my wife has seen me at certain stages of my life. It's
Sure.
like a company, right?
Yeah, yeah.
People come in to find your company at certain stages. So did they find you when Amazon is what Amazon is, or did they find you when it was just Emma,
Yeah.
right? Like, or if Apple is just app, right?
Right,
Like, did they
right. Yeah.
find you at what point when it's just great and everything is just clicking and rolling, or did they see the work put in, the time put in, the failure put in, the course correction put
Of
in, the
course. Yeah.
tweaking and modifying, again, the agility, the flexibility, the ability to say, hey, that didn't work at all. We have to start over. At what
Right.
stage are people finding you? So when you go through that with the premise of it, I think you begin to understand more about, again, the people you're really, really doing it for, why you're here, and then that why is the anchor again. It's the conviction of what brought you together in the first place to do the thing that you're doing for who you're doing it for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we can do a whole session on just the impact of being an entrepreneur to family members, spouses, and children, because it is definitely a wide impact. Every time I speak with you, I can feel like, we can talk for hours. I absolutely love it. But in the interest of time, let me ask you two last questions. One,
Absolutely.
yeah, given your founder journey, what can you share in terms of what you've learned for other founders? What advice, anything that you can think of would be helpful to any other founder trying to build a company?
It's a great question. Great question. And I say that because there's so much that you can throw at that question with the response. And is it one thing that hits that kind of elevates the prayer for me, I guess, today as we speak? I think it's really, you got to trust the journey.
Hmm, okay.
Trust the journey.
Yeah,
It's not easy. it's it's not, for at times, unforgivable.
absolutely. Yep.
um and it will test you. It will
Mhm.
test everything about who you are and what you do and what you believe. And I think in those challenges is when you can kind of really find out a lot about yourself, right? Like,
I
I
love that.
have,
Absolutely.
I have, I have looked at parts of me that I don't like. I have looked at parts of me that it's like, wow, I got to figure that out, right? Like, I have to. That's that blind spot, right? Like, I didn't see that before, but it unfolded and it manifested itself on the journey. So I'd say trust the process, because you will uncover some hard truths about you and about what you're doing, and again, why you're doing it. And when you can kind of come back to the same answer, if the core is the core, then you really have something. You're really kind of cooking with fire, so to speak.
Yeah, so true. I love that. Okay, last one. If you could go back in time and talk to Stephen before Stephen decided to be an entrepreneur, what would you tell
Yeah,
Stephen?
you'll get there in time.
You get there in time. Very good.
You'll get there in time.
Very good.
Um, because
I
I
love it.
think a big part of that is, you know, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
And it's not, it's pacing yourself. Like, timing is key. Timing is key. And I think letting time unfold the way it should naturally do, because we are not the keepers of time. I'm 8 hours ahead of you. So right now you're living in my past, but we're talking in the present.
there
Right.
you go. Yeah, yeah.
So it's I think I think pace and patience, right? So in that comes with that concept.
Amazing. I love it, Stephen. Thank you so much. As I said, I mean, every time I speak with you, I feel like we can talk for hours. So
My
absolutely
guy, my
amazing.
guy, my
Yeah.
guy, for sure.
I
100%.
appreciate you. Thank you so much for all the wisdom you shared, and for everything that you're trying to do with your company and supporting your community the way you are. I think it's absolutely amazing. It's always great to build a company, not just for the profits, although those are always good,
For
but
sure,
also,
100%.
yeah, nothing wrong with that. But
Yeah.
it's definitely great where there's a bigger reason behind it. That the why is so much more important than the results that you're going for in terms of financial gains. So thank you again. I really appreciate you. And I hope to be speaking to you soon. And folks,
Thank
again,
you.
this was the Honest Hour with Stephen Myles. Thank you so much, Stephen. I appreciate your time. And folks, until next time, my name is Payman Shamrzadi, and I've been your host. Thanks for being with us.